Maybe you've spent most of your life trying to be everything for everyone, always giving, always showing up, always wearing that quiet strength, even when no one asked how you were really doing. Maybe you were raised to believe that loving like Christ meant losing yourself, that forgiveness meant silence, that being a child of God meant always turning the other cheek, even when your soul was breaking inside. But what if I told you that not all pain is punishment? That some wounds are not signs of failure? They are divine fingerprints. What if the weight you carry isn't a burden, but a seal? You've been walking through life trying to explain yourself to people who were never meant to understand you, trying to find your place in a world that cannot comprehend the depth of your calling. And that's not your fault, it's your mark. This message isn't about pity. It's not about feeling special. It's about understanding what's been hidden in plain sight. Some people are chosen, and with the choosing comes a kind of pain, a kind of loneliness, a kind of silence that the world can't interpret. But God does. He sees every tear you've cried behind closed doors. He knows the weight of your yes, even when no one else hears it. Throughout Scripture, those God called, He also concealed. He allowed them to walk through rejection, silence, misunderstanding, not because He was punishing them, but because He was preparing them. If you felt invisible, it might be because heaven was covering you. If you felt rejected, it might be because your presence carries something too real for shallow spaces. If you've been crying for answers but hearing only silence, it might be because the answer is being written inside of you. Today, we're going to walk through 7 hidden marks that only the chosen carry. And maybe by the end, you'll see that what's been hurting you was also pointing you. That what felt like isolation was actually consecration. And that God has not been absent. He's been closer than ever, writing your purpose in places no one else can see. Stay with me. This is not just a list. This is a revelation you've been waiting to understand. 1. The mistake of seeking approval while carrying invisible marks. There is a quiet kind of suffering that comes from being misunderstood by the very people you've loved the most. The weight of trying to explain your heart, your silence, your boundaries, only to be told you're too much, too distant, too different. But you were never called to be understood by everyone. Some people were placed in your life to be witnesses of your pain, not interpreters of it. And when you're chosen, that pain isn't random, it's sacred. Many chosen ones carry wounds that no one sees, yet everyone reacts to. Not because you're loud, not because you're rebellious, but because your presence disrupts what others have grown comfortable avoiding. Your standards challenge their apathy, your boundaries confront their control. And the rejection you felt wasn't always personal, it was often spiritual. People don't reject you because of who you are. They reject you because of what you carry. There's a subtle spiritual danger in needing validation from those who were never anointed to walk beside you. You end up shrinking yourself to fit into places God already called you out of. You silence your discernment to preserve relationships He's trying to remove. You wear guilt for choosing peace over people who only brought you pain. And that isn't humility, that's confusion wrapped in spiritual exhaustion. God sees the weight you've carried in silence, the times you've stayed when you should have walked away, the moments you've forgiven again and again, thinking that maybe this time they'll see you differently. But the truth is, they were never meant to see you, not fully, because the kind of clarity you're waiting for doesn't come from people. It comes from God. And once you understand that, you'll stop bleeding for those who were never sent to heal you. The chosen ones carry invisible marks, marks that aren't meant to impress the world, but to terrify hell. Because every scar tells a story of survival, of obedience, of sacrifice. And while the world doesn't recognize it, the spirit realm does. Which is why your life has felt like a battlefield. Not because you're cursed, but because you're called. And the more you carry, the more the enemy tries to convince you that you're alone. But here's the truth. You were never alone. You were just marked early. And those marks were never meant to gain you approval. They were meant to prepare you for authority. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. What they don't see, heaven does. And what they couldn't carry, God trusted you to endure. 2. Marks that do not shine. Silence as a divine seal. One of the most misunderstood seasons in a chosen person's life is the silence. Not just silence from others, but silence from heaven. It's that hollow place between revelation and release, between knowing you were called and seeing no sign of the calling. You pray, but the answers feel delayed. You worship, but the heavens seem still. You show up, serve, believe, and yet everything around you feels quiet. And that silence is not punishment, it is protection. We often confuse God's silence with absence, but that's not the voice of truth, that's the voice of fear. Because silence in the life of the chosen is not a sign that God walked away. It's a sign that He's doing something sacred behind the scenes. God doesn't shout in moments of preparation. He whispers, He hides, He covers. And when He is about to release someone into a season of authority, He first pulls them back into the shadows. Think of Joseph in the pit, Moses in the desert, David among sheep. Every one of them was silenced before they were sent. Every one of them was hidden before they were honored. And it wasn't because they lacked purpose. It was because their purpose was too great to be rushed. You don't throw diamonds into the street before they've been refined. You don't reveal a weapon until it's been sharpened. And God never exposes what He hasn't finished preparing. Silence is not always pleasant. It stretches the heart. It confronts the ego. It makes you question everything. But in that stillness, your identity is sealed. In that isolation, your strength is born. And while it feels like you've been forgotten, heaven is actually writing your name with fire. You are not hidden because you're unworthy. You are hidden because you are holy, because God has chosen to cover you until the time is right. And when that time comes, there will be no doubt. The silence will break. The oil will flow. The same people who overlooked you will witness what they never saw in you. But until then, do not despise the silence. Do not run from the isolation. Because sometimes the most powerful revelations are not shouted. They're whispered. In the dark, diamonds don't scream in the coal. They endure the pressure, they absorb the silence, and then they shine. 3. Emotional signs of being set apart without knowing it. There are wounds that begin early. Quiet rejections in childhood, moments of not belonging, silent questions about why love felt distant even when people were near. And if you've felt that pattern throughout your life, if you've always carried the weight of being the outsider, the misunderstood, the too sensitive, it might not be a flaw. It might be a sign, a mark, a spiritual fingerprint left by the one who separated you before you even knew the reason. Many of the chosen spend years mistaking their rejection for failure. They carry a deep-rooted sense of inadequacy, believing they are unworthy, when in truth they were never meant to fit in. They try to blend into families, churches, communities that do not speak their spiritual language. And when they are misunderstood or pushed aside, they internalize it as something being wrong with them, when the real issue is that they've been walking with a calling that others weren't designed to carry. The pain of trying to be accepted in spaces you were never called to stay in can feel suffocating. You force smiles in places where your spirit is shrinking. You stay loyal to patterns God already told you to leave behind. And in doing so, you confuse spiritual separation with personal failure. But God doesn't isolate to punish. He separates to prepare. The enemy attacks the chosen early, not because they are weak, but because he senses what they carry before they do. Take a moment and look back at the places where everything seemed to fall apart. Relationships that never worked, jobs that always ended, churches where you never felt at home. What if those weren't coincidences? What if they were interventions? What if what you called failure was actually God's hand, gently closing doors before they could trap your spirit in cycles that would drown your calling? Because sometimes frustration is protection. Sometimes the thing that didn't work out wasn't your mistake, it was your rescue. God sees further than we do. He closes what we keep trying to open. And while the world sees inadequacy, heaven sees identity. There is nothing wrong with you. You were simply set apart before you understood the cost of that separation, and the world will never celebrate what it cannot control, which is why the chosen often walk through long seasons of confusion about their worth. They don't see their own light. They carry the weight of others' judgments. But that confusion is not the end. It's the beginning of clarity. Because when you stop trying to fit in, you start realizing you were meant to lead. And when you stop needing approval, you start walking in authority. Heaven never forgot who you are. It's time you remembered too. 4. The mark of spiritual sensitivity that turns into pain. Some people feel everything. They walk into a room and sense the heaviness before anyone speaks. They listen to someone talk and hear the ache behind the words. They see injustice and carry it home in their chest. They weep not just for themselves, but for others, strangers, loved ones, even nations. And they don't always understand why. If that's you, it's not a flaw, it's a mark. One that few see, but heaven knows well. The chosen are often born with spiritual antennas, a kind of emotional discernment that picks up what others ignore. You feel too much, you see too deep, and while that sensitivity is a gift without wisdom, it can become a weight. You carry burdens that weren't meant to stay with you. You absorb atmospheres without learning how to release them. You spiritualize pain that needs boundaries. And before long, what was meant to be sacred starts to feel suffocating. Many confuse this sensitivity with weakness. They assume that because you cry easily, or withdraw often, or get overwhelmed by chaos, something must be wrong with you. But Jesus, strong, perfect, divine, withdrew often, not because he was weak, but because he was wise. He knew when to pour out and when to pull away. He knew that sensitivity without solitude leads to burnout. He knew that being available to everyone would cost him the clarity he needed from the Father. When you're chosen, you're not just called to feel, you're called to discern. And that means asking deeper questions when you're burdened. Is this mine to carry? Is this a cry for intercession or a sign of codependency? Am I being called to help, or am I being lured into a role God never assigned me? Not every burden is your assignment. Not every pain is yours to fix. Some things must be felt, but then surrendered. The world doesn't teach us how to handle this kind of sensitivity, but heaven does. It reminds us that even the strongest warriors must retreat, that even those anointed to lead must learn to breathe, and that spiritual antennas, while powerful, need grounding. Without it, you'll start to mistake exhaustion for compassion, and that's not holy. It's harmful. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are not weak because you need space. You are not too much. You are simply marked. And when you learn to protect what God placed in you, your sensitivity will no longer drain you. It will guide you. It will lead you to pray when others panic, to weep where others ignore, to act with compassion where others pass by. That is not a burden. That is sacred responsibility, but only when handled with heaven's wisdom. 5. Why many of the chosen live confused about their value. There's a kind of attack that doesn't come through crisis, but through questions. Subtle, constant, nagging questions about who you are, what you're worth, whether you're truly seen by God. It's the slow erosion of identity through years of silence, misuse, and spiritual manipulation. And if you've ever sat in a room full of people and still felt invisible, if you've given everything and still wondered if you're enough, you're not alone. That confusion is not weakness. it's warfare. The enemy doesn't always attack with disaster. Sometimes he attacks with distortion. He whispers through rejection. He speaks through absent fathers, controlling leaders, broken relationships. He targets your value so that even when God calls your name, you doubt it was meant for you. Even when doors open, you hesitate to walk through them. Even when someone loves you sincerely, you question if you deserve it. That's not just trauma, that's spiritual sabotage. Many chosen ones were never affirmed. They were celebrated for their service, but not seen in their souls. They were praised for what they could do, but not for who they were. And when that happens over time, something inside breaks. You start believing that love must be earned, that peace must be purchased, that value is conditional, but none of that is from God, because the truth is your value was never in question, only your awareness of it. God does not send people into battle who don't know their sons and daughters. Before Jesus began his ministry, the Father declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." He was loved before he preached a sermon, healed a body, or performed a miracle. That's how heaven works. Identity comes before assignment. Love comes before labor. And if you're trying to earn what was already given, you're living under the wrong voice. Your confusion is not from God. He does not lead through shame. He does not motivate through guilt. He heals through truth. And the truth is, you've always been his, even when you didn't feel it, even when others didn't say it, even when your own mind fought against it. You are not forgotten. You are not random. You are not too late. The enemy wants to shrink your worth so you'll never step into what heaven already planned. But the moment you reclaim your identity, everything shifts. Because when a child of God knows who they are, they stop chasing counterfeit approval. They stop begging for places at tables God never built. And they begin to walk, not arrogantly, but boldly, with the quiet confidence of someone who's been healed in places no one else even knew were broken. The most dangerous person in the kingdom is not the loudest. It's the one who knows they belong, and heaven is waiting for you to remember that again. 6. The mark of silent intercession, the weight of what you cannot name. There are moments when tears fall for no clear reason. A heaviness sits on your chest, a restlessness in your spirit, a sorrow that doesn't seem to have a name. You walk through the day with a weight that doesn't belong to you, and yet you feel it deeply. You pray without knowing exactly what for. You cry without understanding why. And though others may dismiss it as emotion, something inside you knows. This is spiritual. This is sacred. This is not yours alone. Many of the chosen are called into unseen intercession. They are spiritual midwives, carrying in their spirit the groanings of what is yet to be birthed. They stand in the gap for people they don't even know. They weep on behalf of a family member who never asked for prayer. They awaken in the night burdened for situations they've never experienced. And while the world calls it strange, heaven calls it holy. It is not confusion, it is calling. God uses the sensitivity of the chosen to move his heart toward people who have no voice. He trusts them with the ache of nations, the burdens of churches, the spiritual atmosphere of families. But that weight is not meant to crush. It is meant to be carried, then released. The danger is when you hold it too long, when you wear it as your identity, rather than recognize it as a temporary burden from the Spirit. Not every heaviness is yours to own. Some are meant to be discerned, lifted in prayer, and surrendered. The challenge is knowing the difference, because when you don't, you begin to think something is wrong with you, that your sadness is personal, that your emotions are unstable, when in truth, your spirit is simply tuned to a frequency others can't hear. And that's not dysfunction, that's divine responsibility. Scripture gives us a picture of this in Hannah, crying bitterly in the temple. To the outside eye, it looked like emotional chaos, but in the spirit, it was prophetic labor. She wasn't just mourning, she was birthing. And the chosen often walk through this same tension, misunderstood in the natural, yet moving heaven in the unseen, carrying weight without clarity. But what seems like mystery is actually intercession. You are not crazy for feeling what you feel. You are not weak for weeping without reason. You are not broken for sensing battles others don't see. You are being used in ways that don't require a platform, only obedience. And the more you learn to release the weight in prayer rather than carry it in silence, the more your spirit will find peace in the midst of that sacred burden, because those who cry without a name are often carrying the future. Not everything you birth will have an audience, but it will have purpose. And heaven keeps record of every tear, every ache, every silent intercession. You are not alone in this labor, you are simply chosen for it. 7. The hidden reason behind lack of recognition. God is training you in anonymity. One of the hardest seasons for the chosen is the season of invisibility. You serve without being noticed. You give without being thanked. You show up, stay faithful, stay obedient, and yet no one seems to acknowledge what you carry. Your prayers echo in silence. Your work feels unseen. Your gifts go uninvited. And something inside you starts to wonder, did I miss it? Did God forget me? But what feels like neglect is often training. What feels like rejection is often refinement. Before God releases someone publicly, He breaks them privately, not to destroy them, but to prepare them, because what He's building in you cannot depend on applause. It must be rooted in obedience. The danger of early recognition is pride, but the beauty of divine delay is depth. God would rather keep you hidden than let you rise unready. He would rather train you in private than let your gifting outpace your character. And so He withholds visibility, not as a punishment, but as protection. David was anointed while still smelling like sheep, overlooked by his own father, forgotten by the prophet's eye, yet chosen by God. And even after the oil flowed, he went back to the field, back to the silence, back to the solitude, because the anointing was real, but the time was not yet. The crown was his, but the cave came first. And for many who are chosen, the cave feels like failure, but it's actually formation. The world teaches us to chase platforms, but heaven teaches us to embrace preparation. And sometimes that means being misunderstood, overlooked, or even dismissed. Not because you lack value, but because your assignment is still in process. God is not in a rush. He's in the business of legacy, and what He's building in you needs to be strong enough to last long after the applause fades. There's a temptation in this season to give up, to stop showing up, to pull back your heart and hide your hope, because if no one sees you, what's the point? But the point is this: God sees, and He's watching what you do when no one else is watching. He's measuring your heart in the silence. He's testing your posture in the shadows, because if you can stay faithful when unseen, you'll be trustworthy when seen. The oil did not fall on David until all the others were passed over. And some of you are waiting not because you're forgotten, but because God is letting others go ahead first, so that when it's your moment, there will be no doubt that the oil was always meant for you. This is not the end of your story. This is the foundation. And when God reveals what He's been building in you, no man will be able to take credit. No voice will be able to deny it. Because it wasn't crafted by hands, it was carved in hidden places. And heaven always honors what was birthed in secret. You're not invisible, you're just being refined. And soon, the silence will break. Conclusion. Maybe as you listened, something inside you whispered, "That's me." Maybe you've spent years questioning why your journey has been so heavy, why your heart so tender, your voice so silenced, your calling so unclear. You tried to explain your pain, but found no language for it. You tried to fit in, but felt pushed aside. You tried to stay strong, but your soul quietly broke in places no one could see. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still listening, still hoping. Not because it's been easy, but because something deeper has always told you, there's more. You were not overlooked. You were hidden. You were not broken. You were refined, and what the world called delay, heaven called development. You were chosen, not for the stage, but for the sacred, not for the approval of men, but for the anointing that breaks chains. You carried marks others didn't understand. You walked roads few could follow. You endured battles that left no visible scar, but heaven recorded everyone. You don't need to prove your value anymore. You don't need to beg to be seen. You don't need to keep apologizing for your depth, your silence, your spiritual hunger. The things that made you feel like an outsider were the very signs that you were marked from the beginning. And yes, it's been lonely. And yes, it's been long. But the oil doesn't fall on the convenient. It falls on the consecrated. And you, even in your weakness, have been consecrated. So breathe, not because the battle is over, but because you're no longer alone in it. You now know why it hurt the way it did, why the silence lasted so long, why the rejection felt so deep. It wasn't the end of your worth. It was the beginning of your awakening. And God hasn't been punishing you. He's been preparing you for something holy, for something heavy, for something eternal. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are marked, chosen, held. And when the time is right, what He's hidden in you will speak louder than anything you could ever say. Until then, rest in this truth. You don't need the world's recognition when you carry heaven's seal. And hell has always feared what heaven chose to anoint. If this message spoke to something deep inside of you, if you recognized your own scars in these words, don't keep walking alone. Share this with someone who's been silently carrying the weight of being chosen. Let them know they're not crazy, not broken, not forgotten. They're marked. And if you're still in that silent season, stay connected. Subscribe and walk with us through every hidden mark, every unseen battle, and every divine confirmation. Because you're not just surviving, you're being shaped for something sacred. Heaven hasn't forgotten you, and neither have we.